All right, so this is another little series in the or episode in the series of Life with Neil, and today I'm going to be chatting with Jim Vander Schaaf, who is a dear friend, and we journeyed far together, and had many
Far and wide.
far and wide, many meals together. Um, and recently I've been, reconnecting with Jim. We've stayed in touch, but just recently we had a great conversation. And I'm going to ask Jim to give a little bit of his bio in a second. But the reason why I wanted to talk to Jim was because it's something that we got into last week. And Jim, for me, is doing something that I think is important, which is as we grow older, um, uh, staying engaged with life and finding new things to do and finding new adventures. And as we just sort of discussed, I'm very much about health these days, and I think engagement is really important in that. And so Jim, and I think if we don't have at least one laugh from my experience with Jim Vander Schaaf in this conversation, I'm something's wrong. So Jim is a man with a smile, and that's always been a lovely, lovely thing. So Jim, just give a little kind of walkthrough bio of your life and in terms of career, particularly because it's fascinating. Go for it.
Okay, great. So, born in Colton, South Dakota. It's a small town in South Dakota of Dutch parents who were, let's see, third generation immigrants from the Netherlands. Prior to any of Trump's condemnations of immigrants, we managed to sneak in. And it was a small farming community. My father had marvelous skills with everything mechanical. He ran his own shop. My mother was a teacher. So those two disciplines or lifestyles conspired upon me to seek knowledge, and it worked wonderfully. I'll never forget my mother taking me to a library in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a small town, a larger town, some 24 miles away, where my mother used to do her shopping because she couldn't buy local. She would drop me off at the library to my intense delight, and I would stay there badgering all sorts of people for the best books that I could find. So I couldn't have found a better place than a local library. So anyway, my curiosity was piqued by my parents and my own initiative early. And I think that's helped me throughout my entire life, because I started building my own toys with my dad's tools and my mother's throwaway peach boxes. Peaches used to come in wooden crates, and that left a good residue of building material for a potential woodworker. So I built all my own toys with my dad's simple tools. And so that started the interest in woodworking way back when. The other interest which I had, which was piqued by my heritage, and that is that, two things. One, Vander Schaaf means from the plane being a woodworking instrument to smooth surfaces of wood. So, if you have a name like that, you're kind of forced to live up to that heritage. you better do something in that field. So later on, I published a book about woodworking. But the other thing is, my great-great-great-grandfather was a shipbuilder. And so it was quite natural for me to get into naval architecture and marine engineering and shipbuilding. So anyway, good start. Off to Calvin College in Grand Rapids later. High school was 20 in my graduating class. It was hard not to do well. The subjects were so easy. I mean, it was ludicrous. Then I Went to Calvin College and found out it was an actual university where there was, you were really pushed to work hard. I never took a book home in high school, and I find myself getting C's my first year at Calvin College. I was devastated. How could this possibly be? So anyway, that was a good lesson. The lessons in my life always seem to come after my hitting a blank wall or a brick wall, sometimes extremely hard. Just, I mean, I love it. You know, I mean, throughout my life, those are the lessons that I learned most completely and well. So Calvin College after high school, 3 years pre-engineering, then University of Michigan. And at Michigan, I started out okay, but then kind of floundered because I really didn't know what I was about. I really didn't know what I was going to do. So I ended up getting a job through a professor who saw a gleam in my eye at Ford Motor Company, and had a project which involved running. Well, the whole idea was to determine if a jack would fall over if a bus passed a car up on a jack changing a tire. That was an amazing project. So it took me longer than the allocated 4 months before I returned back to school. I needed the summer off. So I asked Ford Motor to get me a deferment for the Vietnam War. Well, they claimed, sure, we'll go ahead and do that. That would be no problem. They failed in that task, or put it, you know, in the outbox when it should have been in the inbox. And so I ended up being drafted on my 26th birthday. This is the last date in the United States that you can get drafted. At least it was in 1968. So, so the question that I faced was, okay, should I accept this wonderful invitation to be a draftee, or should I find some residence in a place like Sweden or Canada or someplace like that? Well, after some modest amount of reflection, I realized that as an engineer, I would face condemnation and probably job loss if I fled to a foreign country and then came back and tried to get a job in any defense industry or any shipbuilding industry or anything like that. So I stuck it out, went into the Army. I became a chaplain's assistant because I had some knowledge of religion and ability to play the piano. And after a brief introduction to typing at Fort Dix in New Jersey, I had Sergeant Garcia. He gave me an intense typing course. When I started his course, I typed 60 words a minute. After I finished it, I was down to about 23. So had time in the Pentagon for 2 years, the remaining months of my service. I was out in 22 months. I got a early release to return to University of Michigan, and participated in the protest movement without uniform in front of the White House in 1968-69. It was quite interesting. A lot of things, as you can imagine, were going on in 1968. The student rebellion in Chicago, the Democratic Convention, just a whole history of things. Anyway, graduated Michigan, went to Washington, D.C., went to work for the Navy, had a master's in aerospace engineering and marine engineering, naval architecture at that time, and then went to work for a small company, CAD-CAM, incorporated in Annapolis. Let's see, I went to work for the Maritime Administration for a while, and then later to a program that they had sponsored to improve productivity for shipbuilding in the United States. It was, we had 7 or 8 shipyards with government support, and we would build computer aids with their participation to help productivity. the government had a very broad program to do that. It was well funded and well participated in. So that led to a trip to Japan, where I looked at advanced methods that they were using to build ships. They could build ships in incredibly less time than we could. And I was offered a job at Bath Iron Works to manage their program of bringing Japanese technology to the US, to Bath Iron Works at that time. So I did that, worked there for 15 years, and ran their CAD/CAM department as well. Then was introduced to methods. Well, what happened is that there was a regime change at Bath Iron Works, and prior to the regime change, I thought that my participation in the advanced technology program was supported by senior management. Actually, they supported it only to help with the largest leverage buyout at that point on Wall Street history. And they had no intention of actually supporting the program by helping to make change. It was all about making change in the way you do business. And as you know, and as Machiavelli has told us, that's one of the toughest jobs around. So I was disillusioned. I was incredibly naive, if you think about it, to believe that what I saw I should believe in terms of management supporting change. So then there was regime change, and regime change moved me out of full participation in management. And later I left Bath Iron Works and went with the company that Neil and I and several others were involved with Michael Kelly and Dan Thompson. And the whole idea was to help make change, make it easier, make it more effective, make it fully participative. And of course, that was perfect for me because I had just come off a job that had not occurred yet. So of course I was seeking ways. I'd never had a failure. This was my first major failure in an organization at Bath Iron Works. And you know, everyone should have one, and I recommend it come early, because if it comes late, then you have much less time to recover. So in any case, we had a grand time with advanced management catalyst and the process that Michael Kelly invented, and Dan Thompson and I and others added the third day to a 2-day process that was very effective, but lacked the follow-on steps to implementation. So in any case, we were successful in working with a number of large companies, and I was involved with Intergraph Corporation and people there. And so that was just a very positive time in my life. And I later went privately to work with Intergraph, and we did a lot of work with the Air Force to help them with a project that was really taking a system to compute a balance for the Air Force's spending and put that in place across a huge number of legacy systems. That was a marvelous project, a very lucrative project, very successful project. So after that finished, I went back to my interest in sailing, which is always there, again, because of my heritage, and bought a boat, and with my wife, sailed around the Caribbean. I should mention that during my period at Bath Iron Works, I got divorced. That was another brick wall very important lessons for Jim. And so I was divorced and then found another lady. And I should also mention that I have 3 lovely daughters who have supported me my entire life and have been a joy and a very important part of my life.
Mm.
So what else? Anyway, left that work and formed a company to help deliver yachts after a return from sailing. And then I got back into my passion of woodworking. Met another lovely lady after my second wife, Anna, died of Alzheimer's. And Sylvia is a very important person in my life. And now I'm involved in delivering yachts and building furniture, and couldn't enjoy it more. That's a short story. Sorry it went on so long, but.
No, I just, one, I didn't know that you worked at Ford. I didn't know you were drafted after all those times. So, there's some fascinating things in there. I think, one of the things that the sort of the interesting thing for me and part of this conversation is that point, there was a point, right, with this, particularly with this involved with the change, we were doing a ton of change work, right, in the 90s. And you went on into Intergraph. But there was a point there, right? There's kind of a point where you said, enough of that stuff, because at that point you've been 20, 30 plus odd years, or maybe more, in management consulting, tech, change, innovation. And then as we kind of the subject we're getting into, which is like, okay, now we're kind of moving into later life. You decide to one, start getting into yacht delivery, which is a pleasure thing, but you also decided to get into woodworking. What was going on in the thinking at that point? What was saying, okay, I've had enough of the Intergraph and or whatever that was, and said, I want to get into this. What triggered that?
Well, there's several levels of it, as you can imagine. The thing that triggered the major transition was being my role with Intergraph at the last project was that of facilitator. Wherever a facilitator was needed, I went, and I was a management facilitator for that entire project, and it involved several hundred people. Mm-hmm. And it became apparent to me and to Blaine Schertz, but myself first, that my role was coming to an end because the project was at a point where it had independent momentum. Mm-hmm. And was clearly not so much in need of that kind of facilitation, mm-hmm. those kinds of conversations. And so what I was contemplating at the same time was going sailing, cruising, getting away from the rat race, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so I was financially able to do that because of the position I had, and it was very well paid at Intergraph. I was an independent consultant, so could afford to purchase a yacht, which I did, and Anna and I sailed around the Caribbean. But just like you asked the question, enough is enough. And you do this for a long period of time, and you just realize that there's a lot more to life that you may be missing out on, that if you're going to take advantage of, you better do before, you start to dodder around and are not able to. If you want to sail, you got to be lively. So all of those factors came together and said, and it was really lovely because Hannaford asked me, who was the director of the project from from the Air Force. He said, "Jim, where do you want to have the next meeting?" Because I told him I was boogieing out. He said, I told him I want to go out to Arizona. And we did, and it was lovely. You know, it was just one of those lovely transitions. I didn't always have lovely transitions, but this was a nice one.
Yeah.
So I knew it was right. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
So you're now doing, you said something, funny to me last week, which was, you're 78 now, right? Correct? Is that right?
I believe so, yes, unless I've lost count.
Right. And you're still doing boat deliveries, and somebody said to you, that would appear rather risky, right? At your age, right?
Well, I certainly hope so.
Well, but I think one of the perspectives I'm trying to also get across here is we can fall into we can retreat, right?
Yes.
I found myself at 59 at a fork in the roads, and I really wasn't quite sure what was ahead.
Yes.
And at that point, I think, obviously you chose, all right, go on a yacht and go sailing around the Caribbean, but really sort of getting into doing boat delivery, which actually, from my knowledge of other people, doing that's not always that easy, right?
Right.
You don't know
Right.
who you're going to be with.
And plus you have an opportunity to learn because you're providing education to other people and they're aboard. So,
right.
That's another lovely form of this transition.
So you at this point in your life, you don't see that as risk, you see it as opportunity.
Yeah, risk is a funny thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Risk is a really funny thing. Risk says to some people, I better not go outside today. Because my gosh, I might get a sunburn that could cause cancer all over my body and I might die. Well, okay, if that's how you want to live your life, then that's the choice that you make. I don't quite know why I'm interested in taking the risks that I do, but I don't really look at them the same way I think other people do. I look at them truly, like you're saying, as opportunities. I mean, take this latest one. I'm going to be 11 days at sea. I'm going to be with somebody who is a solid, very strong young man. We're on the inside of the ICW and the outside in the ocean only when the weather dictates. Yes, the hurricane season is stronger, but our weather prediction models yield data 5 days in advance today. So we know things that we didn't used to know. So it's not as risky. Yes, things can break, all right? But you prevent that. You don't prevent that. You get a towing card. I mean, you do things to mitigate risk. But you also know that some things are going to happen that you just can't prepare for at all. Well, I'm willing to take those risks because that's just an adventure.
And then, just the other thing that just sort of came up for me was you had a divorce, that's loss, right?
Right.
You had
Right.
You went into a career with BIW with an expectation that didn't happen. That was a loss, right?
Well, it was only a loss in the last 3 years. The first 12 were marvelous.
Sure, but still, again, you meet that, and the place where I'm sort of coming to is here. You are you go out and you go and now you kind of moved into another space of adventure, and you had another great loss, and with Anna,
Right.
and Alzheimer's, which is a in my experience with my own father is a prolonged loss.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
What was that like experiencing that at this point where you're about to say, okay, here's this new chapter, and suddenly that, what kept you going in that?
Well, at one point, close to the end, I almost was not going. I mean, when you have somebody with Alzheimer's that you're taking care of, and this was really, depending on how you measure it, the last 7 years were the hardest. Obviously, that's true. But I mean, I'm trying to communicate that it's more than just a one-time occurrence. It happens over a period of time, and it's a very slow thing. And it takes your entire life over.
Mm.
You no longer are dreaming about things that you might do in the future. You're dealing with the fact that she just walked out of the house and you have no idea where she is. And she's wandering down in Old Orchard Beach someplace with a chopping board in her hand, I mean, so all the things that you were thinking about doing or wanted to do are put on hold. And I had gained weight, I had become depressed, but my focus was on doing everything I can for her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is no other choice for anyone who has a moral compass than to do that. And so that's what I did. But I think it was harder on me than it was on her. I don't think there's any question about that. So when I say I almost augured into the ground, I mean that from a total Jim perspective. I just, before we found a place to put her in comfort, I didn't know if I was going to make it.
Yeah. So how did you come back from that?
Well, she was put into a facility. I could visit her on a regular basis. It was clear that that was the right decision. That opened up my life to start thinking about other possibilities. I started to reach out to try to reconnect with friends and to meet new people. And I started to I ate healthier foods. I was taking care of myself as opposed to somebody else. I met a lovely lady fairly quickly who reacted very positively to my story about taking care of someone else. That, of course, is Sylvie Thompson. And she and I have been together, well, almost within 2 months of Anna's going into the facility. And then shortly after, well, a year and a half after Anna went in, she passed away.
Mm.
So, it's just been this natural upswing since then.
Sure. So as we were sort of talking, prior, kind of reconnecting into the fabric of community, right, is vital, right, and not
Absolutely.
not shrinking. There's a space, I think, where whether it's something that happens with your partner or whether it's something happens in life, but you at some point you have to make a choice. Am I growing or am I dying? And so you chose to grow, and I think applaud you for finding kind of another relationship, because there can be a lot of guilt in that.
Right.
So you so Anna passes and you're kind of moving on doing the yacht delivery, but then you kind of went back to the peach boxes.
Exactly.
So life comes full circle.
Right.
So obviously you had a big connection to woodworking and stuff as a kid, so that's obviously a trigger. So now you're doing this beautiful work. So but you took it to some other place else, which was, it wasn't just about going and doing some woodwork. Tell us a little bit about Down East Wood Art and really the motivation there, because you're growing in this. right? You've written a book. So tell us about that journey.
Uh, um, I was always interested in making things. I never understood people that simply wanted to buy things, and it always struck me as odd. And it seemed like an extension of their ego. And maybe my wanting to build things is an extension of mine. I'm sure it is, but I'm not trying to be critical. I just don't understand people that don't want to know how things work or how things are made
Mm.
or what you can make. Or I don't understand the words, I don't think you can make that. I just, that is, I can't even believe that people say things like that. Like, oh, I don't think I could ever make that. Well, yes, you can. You know, I don't know where it comes in me, but it's always been there. I think it comes straight from my heritage. You know, it's like in my DNA. I have to be making something. I
But it,
have to understand how things are made. I have to put things together. I have to explore my creativity by saying, "Oh, damn, that's a difficult job. Let me go do that one."
but there seems like there's also a desire in you to share that knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's where my mother comes in, you know. God bless her. I mean, she her techniques were marvelous, and I've only gotten close to using them. Here's a technique she used on me when I was probably 15 or 16 years old. I told her that I was going to Sioux Falls and I was going to get a job. And I was barely old enough to drive. You could drive back then. And mom says, "Oh, Jim, you're not going to be able to get a job. That's really tough. You are just a young man and you would have to go there and talk to people and try to convince them that, you know, you're worthy of being hired." I said, "Mom, just for that, I'm going to get 2 jobs today." Now, isn't that a marvelous technique to use as a mother?
Yeah.
Well, she knew exactly what technique to use on me.
Mm. Right. Right. Right.
I just love it. I
Right.
just love it. So, so, you know, I can't imagine just learning something and keeping it to myself.
Right.
That makes no sense to me. Yesterday, I got a call from a guy, and he said, "I love this. I hope I get 1,000 calls like this." The guy says, "Jim, I don't know if you remember me. My name is Tony Jackman, and I'm struggling with this problem, and I wonder if you might want to help me out." I said, "What's the problem?" He says, "Well, I've got these splayed legs that I got on this grinder for a metal object. It's a big wheel. It's like 2 feet in diameter, weighs 50 pounds, and I rebuilt the frame for it because I found it in a friend's barn and I just had to redo it. But now the legs don't fit flat on the floor." And he says, "I don't know how to cut compound angles." And I said, "Tony, I am so happy you called me, because this is a problem that I can show you in a New York minute, and you're going to be so delighted you're going to want to tell everybody about it." And so he's coming over this afternoon at 2:00. I love it. I
So,
love it.
so this aspect, sort of coming back in, I mean, I kind of what I, hope people sort of get from this, right, is you're engaged, you know,
Yes, I
and
can't help it.
right, and what do you think is really vital about that?
That I feel good about myself.
Mm.
I can't, I mean, when I share a story like this, and when Tony learns this technique, then everybody wins.
Mm.
I certainly win because I feel valuable.
Mm-hmm.
If I grow old and get crotchety, it'll only be because I don't feel valuable. Well, I have to find, and that's the same as vitality, right? It's the thing that motivates you to get up at 8:00 in the morning, having dreamed at 2:30 of all the ways that you're going to create this thing that you've never built before.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that's the essence of life, isn't it? To stay vital, to stay connected, to stay in touch with your fundamental needs.
Yeah, I think the need, I think certainly the need to feel that you're of value. And that's tricky because that can be the way you talk to yourself,
Yeah, right.
right? And that's
You
where,
can do it, yeah, negatively, right? Yeah.
yeah. And I certainly have gone down that road a few times. Um, but this piece around kind of the keywords I sort of picked up with you is, curiosity, maintaining curiosity, um, a desire to share, um, being, finding fascination in anything, making things, okay, um, um, curiosity, sharing, making, and I think I think we define the risk taking is really not so much risk taking, but exploring the unknown with a perspective that there's opportunity at the end of that rainbow.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. If you just use the word risk taking, it kind of implies that you haven't thought things through and you're just jumping into a void. That's not the case at all. I mean, I'm not that kind of a risk taker.
Well, just a couple of final questions.
Sure.
What's on your bucket list left?
I don't know if I have one so much as I hope to discover more things in it that I'm not aware of at the moment.
Okay. Okay.
I mean,
And,
there are certainly things that I would like to do, but I don't look at it as a list that I'm going down and trying to accomplish. I look at more of it's a lifestyle of what I want, how I want to live my life.
and my question is, how did you look at aging as a young man, and how do you look at it now?
How many hours do we have?
Fairly brief.
All right. As a young man, had no interest in the subject or the concept because I just, you think life goes on forever and you're never going to die. As a rather older, occasionally doddering woodworker and boat deliverer, I realized that that's not the case, and I look for signs in myself of what I need to pay attention to that may indicate that life, in fact, does have an ending. So, I mean, it's a heightened awareness, I think, more than anything else, and just watching those things that could be problematic.
And the last question is, if you were able to go back to young Jim, what would your advice be to him now?
I would suggest that he meet Neil Cambridge much earlier in life.
That's not the right answer.
Advice? I don't know exactly what I would say to him. I'd probably try to get to know him a little bit better. And if I was on one of my much better days, I would try to teach him in the same way my mother taught me.
I'd say to him, never let the candle of your curiosity burn out.
There you go. There you go. I love it.
All right, Jim. Well, I thank you. Not just
Neil, I thank you. This has been really quite fun and interesting.
Yeah. Well, as has most of my episodes with you. I'm gonna put the links to your two websites on the frame of this, so people will know how to connect to you. and which I encourage them to do, particularly Downey's Wood Art, which is just some amazing pieces of work in there. And
Thanks.
if you need a boat delivered, here's the
Right,
guy.
right. I'll keep that in mind.
Right.
I'm curious, is the recording available?
Yeah, I'll be posting. I'll do a little chop off on the end here. I'm actually going to hit stop now.